Welcome to our lunch keynote session. That was good. My name is Lori Bronstein, and I am the Director for Green Schools at the Delaware Valley Green Building Council. And I've worked alongside Brad Malotsky for the past 4 years to create this event, and we are so thrilled that so many of you have joined us here today. By this time in the program, our hope is that you've had numerous light bulb moments, that you've exchanged tons of business cards, chatted with many vendors in our busy expo hall, and that you've started thumbing through your programs to choose your final educational sessions. But for right now, we'd like you to sit back, enjoy your healthy, waste-free lunches, and get ready for some good old-fashioned inspiration. Back in 2009, Gary Oppenheimer, a gardener from New Jersey, simultaneously began noticing the problems of hunger and wasted food from community and backyard gardens across this country. By making this simple connection, Gary created ampleharvest.org as a nationwide effort to enable America's 40+ million home gardeners who grow food to be able to easily find a local food pantry eager to receive their excess garden bounty. Fast forward 5 years, and Gary is now a sought-after lecturer and speaker, including TEDx, a CNN hero, a Purpose Prize Fellow, a receiver of the Points of Light Tribute, a Huffington Post Greatest Person of the Day, among many other honors. The scope and impact of Gary's idea has been much greater than even a dreamer like he could ever imagine. Gary will share that what began as just a cool idea has become a global game changer, with connections to Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign, and most recently, the Clinton Global Initiative. We think that Gary's talk is going to resonate with each of you in this room. I know that I personally relate to anyone who is a firm believer in a notion that to do the impossible, you must first believe that it isn't. And now we welcome Gary Oppenheimer.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Every time my wife hears these discussions of the awards and everything, she thinks my head gets too big. So believe me, what I did is something anybody in this room could have done, and I hope as time goes on, you will get to understand that this was not something really extraordinary. It was something very, very simple. I'm going to speak for about 25 minutes. We're then going to have 10 minutes of Q&A, so I'm going to hope that you're going to think up questions as we're talking. More importantly, we'd like you to be part of the discussion. So feel free, please, to tweet, text, telex, whatever you want to do, your thoughts. I put some sample text up periodically, but you can certainly send on whatever else that you want. And please do follow us, or like us rather, on Facebook. It's where the bulk of our social media is right now. We're going to be talking about hunger and food waste in America, and you might be wondering how tied is that to the sustainability, and I have to tell you that food waste is a staggering environmental problem in America, which we'll be getting into. This is the richest nation in the world, and yet 1 out of 6 Americans in this country does not have enough food to eat. Put that in different perspective. In this room, based on the number of people who I'm told are here, 125 of you don't have enough food to feed your family. And just look around and just get a sense of how many people that is. These are not the people on the other side of the railroad tracks. These are your neighbors down the street. They may well be you. We also have in America 40+ million people who grow food in home gardens. By the way, that means that about 100 of you are home gardeners. Collectively, you gardeners are harvesting around 30,000 pounds of food per growing season, and we'll get more into that. The impact of the food imbalance that we have in this country is staggering because of the way the food bank network operates, which is what I'm going to be talking about initially. But the biggest issue is on the health of the country. Our children, well, 1 out of 3 of them is going to be growing up to be diabetic, and we're quickly working towards 1 out of every 2 kids being diabetic. We have malnourished children who do not do well in school, and frankly, their parents do not do very well in the workplace. It's also a national security issue. A huge percentage of people who apply for the military service are not fit to serve. Many of them for health reasons such as obesity, and some also for psychological, but what it means is that we're raising young people who are not going to function well as adults in this country. And as I had pointed out in an earlier speech, we are both exceedingly well-fed and malnourished. Sort of a contradiction if it appears, but you'll see where they come together. This was a tipping point for me. Photograph assembled by Bill Marsh, New York Times. This represents the amount of food lost in America by a family of 4 in a month. It's about 100 billion pounds a year. It's a pound a person a day. Take this in because we all hold responsibility for this. From the farm to your kitchen, nobody is without some culpability in this. A year ago, the National Resource Defense Council came out with a very critical report, critical in terms of importance. 40% of the food in this country is not consumed. More than half of the produce in this country is not consumed. Only a week or two ago, the USDA came out with a report that now 133 billion pounds of food went uneaten in 2010. And just to give you an idea, it's not just a health issue. Look at that number on the bottom. That's $161 billion of food that just vanished. So think of what that does to the health and the wealth of the nation. Jonathan Bloom is a brilliant writer and blogger and author, and he was the first person to put sunshine on ampleharvest.org. His website, wastedfood.com, should be a must-read for all of you, and the book is extraordinary about hunger in America. He's part of ampleharvest.org. So I know there's been a lot of discussion here about waste. 18% of the waste stream, 18% is food. Now, that's not just bad for the environment, although it is. It's frankly bad for your pockets. Because at least in my town, ultimately, the taxes are dealt with in the terms of the tonnage of the waste. The more food we waste, the higher the tonnage, the higher my taxes go up, which means all of you are paying for the food, not just in terms of the health of the community, but also what's in your pocket and your taxes. I'm an aging geek. I'll admit it. I soldered a computer together in the early 70s. I was one of the pioneers in electronic mail. I invented the electronic newsletter, which means, and with all apologies, I probably invented spam. I'm sorry. But I also see things as interconnected webs. And I see disparate things, and I see links. It's just the way my mind works. And when I became aware, I'm a master gardener, I'm a Rutgers environmental steward, and I saw a disconnect in the food system in 2008. And there was a story behind that, which I don't have time to go into. But I realized that the problem we have wasn't that we couldn't feed ourselves. The problem was only that we weren't feeding ourselves. What we had was an information choke point. And let me go into some detail. Imagine if you were traveling down roads and every time you wanted to get onto a superhighway, you saw this. Any highway in America you got on, there was a don't enter. What does that mean? The highways would be empty and the local roads would be clogged. Think of the stress on you as individuals, the stress on the environment, the stress on your pocketbook. It slows the whole country down. Commerce, health, everything else gets affected. Just keep that framework in mind. Now imagine for a moment what would happen if we had a food system in which the same thing was happening. So question, by a show of hands, how many of you give to food drives? Thank you, most of you. How many of you saw signs or were told don't bring fresh food, only canned jars and boxes? Look around you for a minute. We have been inculcated with the idea that we can't donate fresh produce. Therefore, we don't. The result has been that when you do go into a food pantry, by and large, and there are exceptions, I don't want to say this is a blanket rule, but in large part, it's processed food. So if you remember the earlier slides about the obese kids and the obese adult, kids are growing up today, 1 out of 6, thinking that apples come pre-sliced in cellophane or peas come in cans and not pods. The access to fresh food for many of our children simply isn't there. The result is that we have lots of fresh food in the country that's being thrown away, and we have lots of children that just don't get access to it. So before I can go into any greater detail, I talked about the interstate highway system and that roadblock. I got to talk to you about the food system in America and how it's built. And then we can get into the discussion about the problem and the solution. So in large part, the food safety net in America has built the following. We have an organization I'm sure you've all heard of called Feeding America. Their old name was Second Harvest. And they're in the center of the food bank network. It's a membership organization. So connected to Feeding America are 203 food banks across the country. Phil Abundance, for example, here in Philadelphia is one of them. Connected to each of these food banks are some hundreds or thousands of local food pantries. Now, I know people from around the country are here, so depending upon where you are from, it could be called a food pantry, food cupboard, food shelf, food closet, and if you're in the Northwest, just to confuse things, it could also be called a food bank. In large part, a food bank is a large warehouse. That's where large amounts of food come in, and the food pantry is where people in the community go to get food. But so that's the architecture of the system. And this is just a zooming in a little bit. And you can see the warehouse structure and then the connections to the, to the food pantries. Here's how the food flows from a food bank through that red line to the pantry to the community. You'll notice the shape of the line. There's a choke point there. The problem is the same sign that said the road is closed, don't come on the highway, is the very message you've all heard, don't bring fresh food to a food drive. So the processed food goes to the food pantries, but the fresh food doesn't. The result is that people like me, and probably many of you who are home gardeners, will often harvest more food than you can use, preserve, or share with friends, and the rest is either left to rot in the garden or thrown away. Now, I've tried to give food away in the past. I've discovered there are only so many cucumbers you can give to friends and still have them call you a friend. And I'm sure, and this is true, but in the South, people will lock their cars when they go to work, and they're not afraid it's going to be stolen. They don't want to come back to a car full of zucchinis. So what gardeners, and I'm sure many of you have had a similar experience. You've either been the perpetrator or the victim. This is not an isolated thing. These are 3 just average daily harvests from my garden, all right? And there's only so much I can eat at a time. You know, the National Gardening Association says that the average gardener harvests 300 pounds a year. But I'm in northern New Jersey, you're just south of me over here, and that whole harvest comes within a several-week period of time, and you can't eat 300 pounds at a time, no matter what you do. So you share some, you preserve some, and the rest just gets thrown away. So here's what happens. Gardeners are harvesting food, and the food they can't use, preserve, or give to friends ends up going into compost or the waste stream. By the way, this is a real gentleman. His name is Sean. He's a friend in Texas. 12-month growing season, lots of food. Well, I had looked at this model, and I realized that, and this is the aging geek in me speaking, there's a way of fixing this. It dawned on me, why not open up another highway? In March of 2009, 5 years ago, I had the idea that if we could bridge growers using the internet to local food pantries, then they could donate directly to the food pantry, bypass the choke point in the food bank network, and then that food would start flowing to the people in the community. Now, this had several benefits. One, the food doesn't travel very far, which is important for sustainability and reducing the carbon footprint, because frankly, the food goes to a house of worship, a food pantry in a house of worship or YMCA down the street or across town. 70% of America's food pantries are in a house of worship, which makes having this talk in this beautiful structure germane, because this may have or have had at one point been a food pantry. This is the flow of food that ampleharvest.org has enabled. Now, the food bank system continues to supply processed food. Why? Nobody grows cornflakes or bread in their backyards. We need that system for the manufactured food that we feed our communities. But for the benefit of the fresh food that we have an abundance of in America, now we can get it to the people in the community. And remember, I told you this was not a terribly complicated idea. And you look at it and you're saying, wow, it's not a complicated idea. And it's not. As a matter of fact, it's a very simple one. That means that anybody in any community, in any state, is able to be the source of health and nutrition to help the community that they live in. So in my particular case, this is one of my harvests sitting on a table on my back deck, and the food bank wouldn't take it, obviously. But guess what? My neighborhood food pantry does. This means that any gardener in the country can do exactly what you just saw here. You bypass the choke point and get the food, and it's within your own community. So AmpleHarvest.org, from the time I had the epiphany in March of '09 to national rollout, took me 7 weeks. I don't do things small, I don't do things slow, and by not having lawyers involved, it was a great deal there was no friction. But it rolled out in May of '09. I was actually only 3 days behind schedule, so I was very happy with it. And what we did, basically, think of this as a Google for the American food pantry system. Think of it as a model that allows Google's food pantries to be found, because frankly, none of you know where a food pantry is unless you're involved with one. There's no big sign outside of any food pantry saying, hey, we're here, we could use your help. If you're a gardener, you go to the site, you put in where you live, up comes a list of food pantries, you pick the one most convenient, and you deal directly with them. And by the way, this food pantry did something that I had never envisioned, and it added a whole new dimension to AmpleHarvest.org. They started talking back to the community, saying, hey, we really need these things. The notion that the pantry was not just receiving your generous donations of boxes of pasta or cans or whatever, but could actually talk back to you and say, hey, we really need this, or please, none of that, is a whole new concept. It's a really improved flow of information. So the innovations in AmpleHarvest.org. Number one, we didn't build anything new. And that's really, really important. If you think back to the 1970s, when we started recycling instead of trashing, we had to build recycling plants, we had to have new garbage pickups, billions spent in infrastructure. Here we had everything. We have the growers, we have the pantries, and oh yeah, we have the internet. This was just connecting the dots. No new infrastructure, these are existing resources, and that feedback loop that allows the pantries to talk back to the growers, to the growers, I'm sorry. But the other point are these other things here. It reduces the waste stream. Remember, 18% of the waste stream is food? That starts getting reduced. The just-in-time inventory, the pantries can tell the growers when to come, which is right before the gardeners, the clients come. No refrigeration, no storage is going to be needed. This is a viral spread of information. You know, you pass it on. The reduction of the waste stream in taxes, but also the healthcare costs in the country start to be reduced significantly. This is a harvest from a backyard gardener in the urban city of Bridgeport, Connecticut. I used to live in Bridgeport. This is food that went to a pantry and didn't get trashed. This is the opportunity this represents across America. So I want you to visualize something. Imagine that pin is a food pantry in our network, and I drew a 9-mile radius circle, 250 square miles, and I'm asking all of you to figure out, in your own mind, how many gardeners live within 250 square miles? Whatever number you're comfortable with, go with it. So we rolled out AmpleHarvest.org May 20, 2009 with one pantry in New Jersey, 100 the next month, 500 in August, 1,000 on World Food Day, pure coincidence. 2,000 in 2010, 3,000 late 2010, 4,000 in 2011, 2012 we reached 5,000, and today we're approaching 6,700 food pantries in the network, 1 out of every 5 in America. Draw 200. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're only 20% done. There are 33,500 pantries in America, and we need your help to get others in the network. But draw 250, by the way, Hawaii and Alaska included, they're just off the map. 250-mile radius circle, that's about a 20-minute drive. Texas, make it a lot bigger. Everything's bigger in Texas, of course. But otherwise, visualize now this opportunity that's been created. And that's important because people often ask in the food bank realm, well, how much food? And our answer is it's irrelevant. It's how much opportunity. What's been missing has not been that the amount of fresh food, it's the opportunity to donate the fresh food that's been missing, and that's what AmpleHarvest.org has finally enabled. Can we get the sound?
The response to this initiative has been overwhelming. I mean, all kinds of faith communities have been stepping up. Muslim community leaders are hosting sports tournaments to encourage young people to get active. The Jewish Community Centers Association is working with JCCs around the country to grow gardens and to get fresh food in underserved areas. And they're creating early child wellness programs. Groups like the National Council of Churches have joined with an organization called Ample Harvest to help gardeners donate fresh produce to 4,700.
My wife was wondering one day why I was screaming from my office. The First Lady's staff had contacted me and said, you may want to listen to this speech. This was the first anniversary of Let's Move. She just celebrated an anniversary a week or so ago, and that was streamed. This quote, terribly positive message at a time when messages are in short supply. If you've heard the name Vint Cerf, he's considered the grandfather of the internet. That's from him. The other quote from John Carson was President Obama's director of community engagement. We've had support from the East and the West wings of the White House. Why are people so excited about this model? Well, for one thing, we ended a choke point in the American food bank system. There's a flow of food that can now take place that couldn't take place before. We have received, Google's an immense supporter. We have $480,000 a year of free advertising from Google. BV, if you like their wines, you should thank them. They've just committed $200,000 to ampleharvest.org. Points of light from the Bush family, Clinton Foundation, and now the White House. We have Democrat and Republican administrations and legacies that are involved with supporting ampleharvest.org. I got named CNN Hero, National Council of Churches. A long list of organizations have said, this is a really good idea. This is what our growth has looked like. And we're not yet 5 years old. Our 5th birthday is in May of this year. So, what's been the past? This is what America's past looked like. Massive and staggering amounts of food waste. I know some of you were very involved with that discussion. And by the way, for those who don't know, when vegetative material is thrown away in an anaerobic that's devoid of oxygen environment and it breaks down, it produces a pound of vegetation becomes a pound of methane, which is equal to 20 pounds of CO2. So this is not just a waste stream issue on the ground, it's a climate change issue in a very significant way. What does this mean going forward? It now means that 41.6 million growers across America are getting the opportunity to donate food that they previously couldn't share with their neighbors in need. It means that community gardens, when the people go away in August, or they're overwhelmed, or they're simply too large of harvest, are able to donate food if they want. It means that small and large farmers, although we're working on a program for larger farms, can actually be donating the food. And it means that pantries across the country, for the first time, are able to get freshly harvested, locally grown food. And by the way, I talked about the just-in-time inventory. The way the system is set up allows for food to be harvested this morning, get to a pantry this afternoon, and go to a client's home tonight. The clients at food pantries can get food that's fresher than you and I can buy in a supermarket. I mean, take that in when you're trying to get children who've never had fresh food to suddenly be able to have really, really fresh food. The model has attracted a great deal of global interest, and we've now spent time with a number of foreign food bank networks who have explored building their own. Leket Israel, the Israeli food banks, already built theirs. And we are now working with the Zero Waste Group at the United Nations because they're interested in this particular model. We're planning other programs, Gleaning Harvest, which will be a larger program for the agricultural community, the Community Nutrition Index, which will take us away from the discussion of how much food is coming into communities. I think it's irrelevant because how do you measure the donations of watermelon and parsley? To the much bigger discussion of how much nutrition gets into the community. I think that's where we should be going as a nation. We're also going to be getting to Producepedia, so people will be knowing what they're getting, and a push technology. So for the first time, pantries will actually be able to tell the growers, hey, if you want to help us, here's what we need. So what's so special? It's simple, it makes sense, it works in the current environment, no changes were needed, and it spreads virally. It's incredibly efficient. We're not moving food, we're moving information. There's no warehousing, and it's seamless, it's frictionless, and it's universal. It works in any community in the country. It works with any size grower, whether you're growing herbs in a kitchen window or you're a farmer. It builds bridges in the community, and it's open sourced. Anybody has free access to it. And it meets the pressing needs in this country of hunger, nutrition, dealing with childhood obesity, type 2 diabetes, and although it's the end here, I am a Rutgers environmental steward, this should be higher up, the environment. It also has these other cool things in it. The budget cost. We have a small staff in technology. Our cost of operations is 5 minutes of feeding America's budget. It's sustainable, it takes advantage of the goodwill within the communities. The food donations are tax deductible. There is protection in the Good Samaritan laws from that President Clinton had signed, and it's essentially cost-free to the community, and we're in a position to solve a problem and go home. So, how do you get involved? Well, there are two ways you can get involved. One is as an individual. One, go to ampleharvest.org/local. It will take you to a series of 4 steps with videos from our staff that walk you through what can you do in your community to make sure that the maximum amount of food flows. Donate extra food left over from corporate lunches. I'm delighted to tell you that whatever food's left over here is going to be going to the Salvation Army down the road later today. And thank you for helping to arrange that. Centerpieces for pantries. We don't have the time, but when you go home, go to ampleharvest.org/skip the flowers. It's a really cool program that will replace centerpieces of flowers with food that you can then donate the next day to a pantry. And follow us on social media. The other way you can help us is with your organization, the foundations. Ampleharvest.org is really looking for the support it needs to really continue to grow and sustain the programs. So if you're with a corporation that has matching programs, if you are with a company that's involved with cause marketing, if you're connected to a foundation, of course, but most importantly, speaking opportunities and virtual food drives, any of these can help us help the country. And I want to understand something. While the food bank network is critical to the well-being of the country, and they do an extraordinary job, and they have to do what they're doing, we need it. This model fills in a gap where there was a leak in the nation's food supply. And it's extremely efficient, cost-wise and energy-wise. What you're looking at here is a map that we put together that represents just some of the photographs we've received of food donations from growers around the country to local food pantries. The idea here is that once you are connected to a food pantry, you've suddenly found out that St. Mary's Church, the synagogue, the mosque, the YMCA has a food pantry in your town. You are now connected, and for the rest of your gardening life, you can donate food. And I should tell you that the numbers you saw on the maps earlier were wrong about the number of pantries, because most recently, pantries in Houston, Fayetteville, North Carolina, Lamoni, Iowa, Seattle, College Park, Georgia, and I'm going to say this wrong, Souderton, Pennsylvania, just recently signed up on ampleharvest.org. The program continues to grow on the pantry side, and it continues to grow on the gardener side. It's 25 minutes. I nailed it. We have 10 minutes for Q&A. So thank you very much. I asked for questions. How are we doing the mic thing? Just coming up here?
Yeah.
If you have a question or something, please come up. I'm at no loss for words, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, ideas, whatever. Anybody? Please don't be shy. I'm the one. Come on up. There's a microphone here. Well, there's also one over there.
Thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
How is the produce transported from the grower to the pantry?
Excellent question. And the answer is we're not involved in it. 99% of the time, you, the backyard gardener, will donate the food when you harvest it at your convenience, and when the pantry wants it, you will take it. This is not a transportation across the state or across the country. Right. It's down the street. It's maybe a 20-minute drive, but typically the grower. Now, there are some cases where pantries say, hey, we'll come and pick up the stuff. But the model is best that the grower, when he or she does the harvesting, takes the food there at the times that the pantry wants. So the logistics of this model are 100% distributed. We're not touching it, and this becomes a permanent, sustainable link between you and that pantry.
It's a great idea, but it would be more green if there was a cycle of pickups by the pantry to the growers to bring it. It'd be one vehicle instead of 10.
That's not how nature works. Food's harvested when the plants are ready. I agree with you from a sustainability perspective, but you're dealing with an agricultural cycle and the convenience of everybody. Some pantries can arrange that. Some do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
Have you thought or made any plans to look at things beyond just those that are grown in a garden? Eggs, seafood, meats, any of those other kind of materials?
All right, you've raised a good question. The answer is we don't. Once you are connected to a pantry, you can ask the pantry, what will you take? For the record, I have 6 girls, and I go out every morning and get eggs. So I have chickens. I'm in northern New Jersey, and so in northern New Jersey, in my town, 2 of the pantries will take eggs. You can take them. Issues when you're dealing with meat and with fish, it varies based on the state you're in and health regulations, and that, again, is something you should discuss with the pantry. Food pantries, by and large, I should explain, think of it like a little grocery store with no cash register. A soup kitchen is serving meals. So if I'm showing up with fish, it depends on what setting it's going to be ideal in. Processed food should be from an industrial kitchen if it's going to be donated, and that can go to a soup kitchen if they will take it. And any food that you have cut, pierced, or anything probably won't be accepted, especially if it's from your home. The answer is yes, this model is applicable to a much larger picture. It's a question of simply what is worked out between the community and the need in the community. Our job is not to do that. Our job is to enable that discussion to take place. It's then the community's job to enable all those things to happen. Thank you.
Great job.
Yes.
So he kind of stole my question because I'm not a backyard gardener, but I am a backyard farmer. So I had the question about honey and eggs and things like that. So just work with your
It's the same idea. Donate what you can't use, or in your case, possibly sell, and talk to the pantries. They may take the honey. Some may say no. Try another pantry. Try another state if you're near a border or something. But it's something you work out. And the stuff that nobody will take, if you have a big event and there's half a plate tray of lasagna, nobody's going to take it, that might become food waste, but at least we've greatly reduced what has been wasted up until now.
So sidebar, from someone who grew up in a profoundly poor family and eating just really unhealthy food, it's a really nice thing that you're doing this because you need good food.
Thank you. I appreciate the compliment, except I'm not doing it. And I want to be clear about this. When I was a kid, my mother loved Leonard Bernstein. And I never understood it. The guy waved a stick. He didn't make any music. We're waving the stick. 40 million growers make the music. I just want to be clear about that. Yes?
A question on employee gardens. I'd really love to get more gardens, or any gardens actually, done across my company. What's kind of the best resources that you can recommend? Is there something you can put up on your webpage on how to start them?
That's not our job. We're very narrow. Go to the Master Gardener Association in your county. They're the people who can help you. We don't tell people how to grow. We don't tell people how to cook. We're just the connector.
So you say Master Gardeners?
Master Gardener. It's every county. Go to the state unit. What state are you in?
We're all over the United States.
Okay, whatever. They're all tied to the land-grant university, the state university, Rutgers in New Jersey, for example, Penn State here. Contact the Master Gardener organization in your county, and they will be able to help you with getting a garden started.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
You actually just answered part of my question.
Okay, sorry.
A bit, but so I was asking, there's 3 parts to food security, and one's accessibility, then availability, and then utility. So is there, and it sounds like Ample Harvest is taking care of the first 2. Are there any motions in plan for education projects or programs?
No, and the reason is other people are doing a really good job about that now. If you're going to be a good nonprofit, stick to your mission and partner with other organizations. So Strength.org, for example, is a wonderful program that teaches people and food pantries around the country what to do with food that you get, and they have chefs traveling around the country doing that stuff. We're in a very narrow niche, and that niche we own, for lack of a better word. I hate to sound so provincial about it, but we're really good at it, and the moment we get into other areas, we're going to be good at nothing. So Strength.org has, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the program, but they send chefs around the country on how to cook and how to prepare. We partner with lots of other nonprofits. And those are the people. So just like we partner with the Master Gardeners on how to grow, Strength.org does on how to cook. We're just facilitating that pipeline to get the food in. So the gardener's work doesn't go to waste, and that the people actually have something to cook with.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
First of all, great presentation, by the way, very inspiring.
Thank you.
My question to you is, one of your slides, first slide I think it was, mentioned so many billions of dollars of food is being wasted. Now, since you started this program 5 years ago, do you have any data on how much food was stopped from being wasted? Is that something that's available?
I hate that question. And I'm going to tell you why. And the answer is a qualified yes and no. That question, because when you're dealing with processed food, there's boxes, there's weights, there's mass. And I said when you're dealing with fresh food, I show up with watermelon, somebody else shows up with spinach. How do you compare them? And nobody really has the ability to weigh. I show up with we do surveys of pantries. And we get answers. We ask for give us poundage, or even tell somebody shopping bags, and we'll convert it to 20 pounds per bag. Bushels, boxes, carloads, truckloads, bags. It's all over the place. Our estimates from our second year of operation, our first year of operation was 11 million pounds. Second year of operation was 20 million pounds. These are statistical samplings, which I never liked. And the bigger issue is that if you remember that earlier slide with that pipeline, we don't touch the food. We see it sort of sliding past in a way. So the discussion, the accuracy really goes to how much opportunity have we created, the amount of, this is a thought experiment for all of you. And this is where I struggled with this very question. So I'm with you in that.
It was just, it was pure curiosity.
No, but it's a good question. I want to tell you with this thought experiment with, if every pantry in America was on ampleharvest.org, all 33,500, and if every grower in America knew about the opportunity to donate food, all 41.6 million, and if there was a drought or a blight and every garden in America was wiped out, are we a success or a failure? Success, raise your hand. Okay. Failure, raise your hand. That's the answer. And I agree with all of you who raised your hands. The point is that the success of ampleharvest.org is not how much food was not lost, it's that food was not lost. A woman asked me last week, when did you know you were a success? And I said to her, the first time one bag of food was donated. Everything else was building on that success. So and the goal here, and I think any good, nobody's being hit for money anymore for polio or smallpox, right? Why? It's cured, at least in America, and it's gone. A good charity should strive to put itself out of business. Our goal is to make it so that enough growers know to donate enough food that we're not needed anymore. We can shut our doors and get back on my bicycle. So the amount of food is not the discussion, it's the amount of opportunity. But if you want to do the math, 41.6 million growers times 300 pounds harvest on the average per grower, factor out whatever they might want to keep for themselves, and the rest is the opportunity. I once did the math and came to a number of something like 200 million pounds if people donated 10%. I could be high, I could be low, it's not important. It's that people were getting food that otherwise would have been thrown away. And I'm sorry, so I don't have a clear answer, and we're trying to shift that discussion away from the amount of food, it's the amount of opportunity. This has been a massive missed opportunity for America, and for the world, by the way, but we're focused on the 50 states. This has been an opportunity that's been facing us ever since the food bank network was started back in the 60s, and we've continued to simply lose this, and it's time to recover this and to bring it back. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there an international component to this initiative?
Yes, we're sharing the knowledge. So I have met with people from Israel, I got to go through the list, the UK, Poland, Greece, Israel, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and one or two others. Only Greece has sent me airline tickets, so thank you. The rest have been Skype or the rest, and I did go on my own dime to visit with Leket Israel. But the model replicates in most countries. It has to be done to meet the local tradition, legal system, and everything, but it should be applicable almost any place else. And again, Leket Israel did a beautiful, that app is just stunning. And it's a tiny country the size of New Jersey. Their food recovery efforts from farms and gardens are staggering. If you go into the Leket Israel Food Bank in Renana outside of Tel Aviv, it is only fresh produce, only, with one exception. I don't know how many of you are or have friends who are Israelis, but Israelis are addicted to this chocolate spread. And so the food bank does have these 5-gallon drums of this chocolate spread. That's the only processed food. Everything else is fresh food. And so Israel has set the standard in terms of what could be done. And they built that model on ampleharvest.org, and I hope that other countries are going to adopt it. There's no reason not to. Once you built it, its operating cost is a fraction of anything else. It's self-sustainable, and it eventually puts itself out of business, and it's a wholesale change of the behavior of 40 million people in this country. So, are there any other questions? Thank you very much. I'm going to be here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to be here for the rest of the day. Please do not be shy about pigeonholing me. I'm happy to chat. Thank you.